Hi everyone. So I already put up the login and the password for this homework solution. So the way it's going to work, the week on which the homework was assigned, that's the folder under which the solution is going to be. Hence, I know it's day 3, but the solution is under day 2. And login is full. Password is, once again, all lowercase, except for this weird thing, that's my zeros, right? That's how I let you know that's not an O, that's a 0. So password with the 0 in the middle. Somebody just say huh? Yeah, so the network is a little bit slow, but
Ellie, so this is homework?
that's the homework solution, yeah.
Good question. When you play it on a slow or even on a middle speed, it works. But on the fast one, it completely stops and you step right.
You tell me, what's the difference between slow and fast?
Reloading. Loading of a page.
No, what's the difference? What's the difference between slow and fast?
One goes slow,
What's the
one goes
difference?
fast.
Slower takes more time, fast takes less time. So what's the difference?
No, even if
Time.
you put,
Wait time.
yeah, even if you put like let's say select weight and stuff like that, it still stops over there. It's still like checks, and then red.
And I would have to see, but mostly it's usually time.
What's there?
Usually
I was trying to put in like the default one, 30,000 milliseconds.
Yeah, so technically it shouldn't take. In this case, it shouldn't have to wait that long. That window comes up pretty fast. So, okay. Again, this is strictly my opinion. This homework, when I designed, had several key points that it was supposed to kind of teach. One of them was that click and wait is not always the best option, and many of you might have actually been stumped at this point over here.
Exactly.
So that's when you click that select button. You know, you say select and a button shows up. That's the 3 dots, the ellipses. And you click it, and those of you who were tempted to say click and wait would have struggled, because click and wait again stands for what 2 commands?
Wait for page to load.
Great, it's click, right? Wait for page to load. So essentially, when you are clicking this icon and you're saying click and wait, what are you saying?
The entire page to...
You're saying wait for the page on which I clicked the button to reload, right? And that doesn't happen. That page just stays. Nothing happens to that page. The second point is where you would have had a problem is actually right here. Yeah, right here. It's not very apparent from this, but this is where you store the link you're going to be clicking, and then you click it. What happens immediately after you click that link? So a window with a list of employee names pops up. The assignment was to store the link content right before you click it, and that's what's happening here, store text. And right after that, you actually go and you click it. What happens to the window after you click it?
Closes.
It closes. So again, if you at that point decided to use click and wait, it would fail. Again, it would give you a problem. And the problem was why? Why did you have a problem? Because the page doesn't exist. It can't reload. It doesn't even exist anymore. It's dead. It's gone. It's history. So essentially, this homework was designed to make sure you guys think before you choose click or you choose click and wait. Because the first 2 days in class, we spent always saying, no, not click, click and wait. No, not click, click and wait. And then what I started noticing was lots of people were saying, well, I'm just going to put click and wait everywhere. So that's why I countered that with this homework assignment. That was one point. The first point was that sometimes split is what you want. The second point was basically to learn to look up stuff by yourself. So I gave you an assignment of going to the reference tab and reading what does select window do, right? Did you guys go and do that? Did you guys read the tab?
It's impossible to understand what's saying.
Well, I mean, it's unfortunately part of the job description that you guys are all trying to kind of move towards. That's sometimes things don't make sense, so you have to figure them out. And worst case scenario is you go and Google. So how many of you were able to figure out what select window does and how to use it in this case? Okay, who wants to kind of, you scream out.
I have a question because it took me a while to figure out. Because I was looking first, I was trying to change the window by name. So my question is why it didn't work when you put name equals orange HRM.
Because name is not the same thing as title.
I mean, title of the window, right? You can select window by title.
You can select it by ID and by name. I'm not sure if you're allowed to select it by title. Let me see.
There is a like by title.
Let's read this up together. Oh yeah, they added that, huh? Yeah, before it wasn't possible.
But it didn't work.
Do you guys remember what was the title of the window that popped open?
Employees or something.
Yeah, I don't know that. In all honesty, this is actually very recently added. Before you weren't able to select by title, so it's part of the new thing. In any case, what used to be here before was just the name and just the window ID. So this is how this command originally was designed. All right, so yeah, I'm not sure why it didn't work. Again, this is new. They didn't have this before. So I actually haven't played around with bar or with title. Before it was only ID and name. This is new functionality. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's actually like recent, like your guys' is recent. So in the end, if you did the Googling and you read the tab, you could have figured out two things. First is that you can actually pass in null, and if you pass in null, it will assume the original window instantiated by the browser. So your Selenium IDE actually helped you figure out what to do in order to wait for the pop-up, right? It actually, most of you, when you were recording, you noticed that it actually said wait for pop-up, name equals employees, right? It had no problems with recording with that. It was actually how do you get back? For some of you, I don't know, maybe some of you didn't have that problem. And that you kind of actually gotten from this. It says that if you pass in null as part of select window, it will assume, oh, you mean the first window where I came from, the original place where I started. So it will actually give you back your starting place. So you actually don't have to say now. You can even leave it blank. And that's why last class, when you were asking me, I'm like, you could even try leaving it blank. I was joking, but I was actually giving you a hint. In fact, if you write your code the way it is and you put null in that value, so let me. The way I did here, if you do that, and then you end up exporting this to Java, this command will actually complain. It will actually be happier if you pass nothing in, if you leave that field completely blank, rather than if you put null.
What if you put null as a value?
What do you mean?
I mean, instead of putting it as a target, put null as a target as a value.
Select window, if you read the reference tab, it only takes one parameter. See? So if you look at the parentheses, there's only one parameter. That means the third column, it doesn't even look at. You can actually use it as a comment field. You can put whatever you want in it. You can put A, B, C, D, E, F, G, flowers, question marks, doesn't matter.
That's why it worked out. Because I left the
Yeah.
target blank and then I put it's a value of it, and it
Yeah,
worked out.
it still worked out. But even if you would have put null into the target field, it would have still worked. At this point in Selenium ID, it takes either. It's just when you export, it's happier with null. I mean with blank. Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so the solution was part of the reference tab. That was part of the homework to read it and to figure it out. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't know that they added new stuff to it, but if it's not working, then I don't really know what to say about that. Okay, and then of course there was the third point to the homework, and that was the regular expressions, right? Or rather the matching, the string matching, not the regular expression, but the string matching. You could have done it any way that you wanted to. You could have used the regular expression, you could have simply used glob, right? So the point was to also match this string that says leave summary for the name of the person for a specific year, right? Now, the reason I put a star after 4 is because I actually created this test several years back. So for me, the year keeps changing. So for you guys, it's not so much of a difference because it will all your homeworks will be within this year. But I have a star there because the year will change, the default year. Okay, any questions? That was the 3 points of the homework. If you were able to get through all of that, then yay.
So we can use null even if the window has an ID.
Okay, null, if you pass in null or blank, you will always, always, always get the parent window.
It didn't work with blank in my case, so I just...
It should work. Blank should work. It sounds like there's something funky going on for you, because maybe if I take a look at it.
Firefox 12 just came out.
Oh yeah, did you upgrade? Yeah, I don't know what to tell about that. So the thing is, you guys, I usually recommend waiting a few weeks before you upgrade, because that gives Selenium IDE time to also catch up. I haven't upgraded yet, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, a good question. So the first verified text is verifying the PTO, right?
First verified text, which one?
Oh, right there.
This one? Yeah.
So what is the second one?
It's verifying the actual title. That the title is displayed for the correct person, which is the person that you selected from that list. Right? So this is the name. So when before I clicked my link, I stored the text. And then I'm also verifying that the entry that I got, or the list that I got back, is for the correct person.
Oh, I see. So not only did you highlight the PTO, you actually highlighted the name
Yeah.
of the person.
Right. So there's two parts to the functionality, right? I'm looking at PTO specifically for a specific person. So I want to make sure both of those are coming back. I hope that's not my card. Oh, stop. Okay, so let's take a quick second to talk about select window and select frame one more time. I kind of glossed over it before, but you will need to understand select frame as well as select window from now on. So I told you the first 2 weeks you don't have to worry. When you see select frame, you can delete it, right? And in fact, you could have done the same thing here. From now on, you do have to understand what they do. But even before that, huh?
I'll use those.
So even before that, let me show you something here. So I told you last week that there is a way to allow Selenium IDE and the debug mode to show you what the actual selector for the window could be that you can use if it doesn't catch it itself. So I happen to know that this command, and you guys should also be able to tell by now, that this command is the command that triggers opening of a new window. Do you guys agree?
Yes.
You move through your UI, you click the ... button, new window pops open, right? Everybody's following, right? Because you all did the homework, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the script to this point, and I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause. I'm going to open up my log, and I'm going to completely clear it. So it's completely clear. I'm going to switch to debug. Completely clear. See, nothing in there, nothing in there. And then I'm just going to make that one step. So I'm only going to execute that one line. That's the command that opens up that window. As you can see, I executed it, the window opened up. And now, very carefully, I'm going to actually look through the content. I'm going to kind of look very carefully through all of it. And it's actually going to tell me the name of the window right here. It says window.openCall intercepted, so it realized that this action caused the window to open up. And it says window ID, which you can use with select window, it actually tells you what to use it with, is employees. Okay? So if for whatever reason your Selenium ID doesn't record it as part of your script, you can still go back and find it out this way. It will actually give you feedback. Another thing that you can do if, let's see if it works actually. No, it doesn't work. There's actually two commands. One is called store all window IDs, and another one is called store all window names. There's two commands. So this is actually your last resort, and it's more of an advanced kind of thing to do. I usually cover it in advanced class.
So what does it do?
It gives you the array of all the either window IDs that are open completely or all the window names that are open. So if you have couple windows that do not have IDs, they're blank, or names, they don't have names, they're blank, it will still give you pointers to them. It will give you an array with pointers to them. So instead of passing in a name or an ID, you can actually pass in a pointer. So, like I said, it's a little bit of an advanced topic. It's going to make more sense towards like day 9. But you do have that command. So if for whatever reason you're trying to reach a window that doesn't have a name or an ID, and as you know, the title doesn't work, or maybe it doesn't have a title or whatever, doesn't have all those things, you can still get the pointer to it by selecting one of these. By either doing the get all window IDs or get all window names.
But replace this command at the very last end of the script, so it will record all the. Can you show it?
It's not the very end. You're basically going to store it into a variable, and then you're going to use that variable as an array. You're going to get out only one of the windows. You're going to say, get me the 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 and pass that in.
So in front of which line would you insert this command? In our particular case, let's see if we didn't.
In our particular case, it would be too complex. We're not going to insert it. At least I don't want to waste class time for it.
Sure.
I just want to throw that out there, that command is available, and when we reach the further on, especially if you go to my advanced class, we play around with it, okay? Just so you're aware that it exists. Okay, that's it, you guys. Any questions about any of this? Yes, no, maybe? Nobody cares?
Who cares?
Okay, so in that case, what we're going to do now is we're going to install Firebug. Did we already install Firebug, everyone?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, in that case, we're going to install Firebug. So again, 2 methods to install Firebug. The old-fashioned way, where you Google Firebug.
What is Firebug?
It's, well, you'll find out. It's a tool. But it's spelled fire, bug, like that. Like fire and bug, but together, Firebug. And you're going to Google it, and if you Google it, the first thing that comes up is the link that you want. And it says download Firebug. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to download Firebug. And it's compatible with versions of 8 through 12. So if you have any version between 8 and 12, get 1.10. You can just download it. And if you have a different version, then get whatever version that you need. You can find out the version of your Firefox by going to the menu and doing help. And the help menu on the bottom says about Firefox. So you can find out what version you have. Like I have 7. So for me, I wouldn't be able to get 1.10. I would actually get 1.8, right? So again, go to your Firefox, Help menu, About Firefox, check your version, and then based on your version, choose the Firebug download that is correct for you. Okay?
This is version.
And it looks like for most of us, actually 1.9 should be fine, for most of us, because it's 6 through 11. If you just got 12, then you need to get 1.10. So can everybody download Firebug?
I have three, version 3 of the Firefox.
Version 3 or 3.6?
3.6.
Again, it's 1.7.3, so it lists 3.6 as a supported version. Just get that one, okay? So, but on this page, you should be able to find the version that works with your browser. Okay? So after you downloaded it, it will ask you to restart your browser. That means you have to completely shut down all Firefox instances, including your IDE, right? Selenium IDE, and then reboot it back up. So you start it back up. And after that, you'll have Firebug.
Поломаем.
So I actually have Firebug 1.9
How do you figure out the version of Firebug?
that you already have. You can either go to your extensions, your add-ons / extensions, or
Since it's really old.
you can actually open your Firebug. You can open it, and you can click here. You can click here and it says About, and right next to About it says
Yeah, if you point the mouse pointer on the
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
I just know, I always look on the downstairs, I never actually hovered. Yeah, so did everybody get it?
Yep.
Can you guys wave at me if you need a little more time? A little more time? Okay, so let's give it 2 more minutes. I know connection is slow. Get any version that's compatible with your browser. Once you're done, you should see a cockroach-looking thing, either A, on the bottom over here, or B, on the top like I do. Depends on your browser version, okay? So either on the bottom or on the top. Now, if you do not see it, it's the same kind of scenario as with Selenium IDE. You're going to have to right-click at one of the empty spaces between these buttons, and you're going to have to say Customize, right? And then you're going to be able to find it in this list and drag it over. So for whatever reason it did not add either on the top or the bottom, you can manually drag it over. Okay. How are we doing? Anybody else needs time? Are we good? More or less? Okay. So you can open up Firebug by either clicking on the icon, which is the little cockroach-looking thing, or by pressing F12. Or if you're on one of those fancy laptops, you might need to have function F12. But either one of those methods, when you open it up, it looks like this. It opens up on the HTML tab by default, and should look similar to what I have. Now, how do you use it? Firebug is this really cool tool. It lets you look up CSS of objects on the screen. It lets you look up DOM of objects on the screen, HTML of objects on the screen. It also lets you run JavaScript and debug your JavaScript. As well as some other stuff as well. But in this case, we're not going to use the other stuff. Okay, so the very simplest thing you would probably be using it for most of the time is to look up locators. Okay? Because I know it sounds right now like Selenium IDE is incredibly smart and it comes up with all these choices for you, but sometimes none of those choices are good. Sometimes you can actually, by exploring, can come up with a better locator. So in order to come up with a locator, not using Selenium IDE, using your own eyes and smarts, what you're gonna do is you're gonna find this pointing blue arrow with a box, right, on the left, and you're gonna click it once. So you're gonna just enable it. You're gonna click it once, not click and hold, but just a full click. As you can see, it's enabled, right? It's enabled. And you're gonna slowly drag your mouse towards the any object that you're interested in. In this case, let's say that I'm interested in let's find something that's nice. Oh, here we go. In the search for field, right? So also be careful. The actual blue box is what you're going to be selecting, okay? So for example, selecting search for is very different than selecting the box right next to it, right? Search for is the label, and this is the text box right next to it. So once your blue box is around the element you actually want to find out information about, that's when you click down again. So you just do a full click again. As soon as you do a full click, that location is set and it's being displayed in the HTML. Make sense? Okay, if you do not click down, so don't do what I'm doing, I'm just showing you. If you found the location you like and you do not click down, as soon as you move your mouse, again the HTML runs away, right? So the HTML is going to keep on changing until you finally click down, and then it's set. So I like this place, I'm going to click down, it's set. Now I can move my mouse up and down, nothing changes, right? Has no effect anymore. Okay? Alright, so good, we found this location in HTML. How does this benefit us? Right? How does it benefit me? Well, I have two things that I can do now that I know which location it is in HTML. I can first of all check. I can hover with my mouse over that HTML and it will do the reverse. It will actually highlight from the HTML what area it corresponds to. So I can say, oh, okay, I did select the right thing. I'm hovering over it and it's still selecting the right thing. Or I can say, you know what? I'm not really interested in this object. I'm interested in the container of this object. I wasn't able to select it, but I want to select the actual container. I wasn't able to find it at the browser, but let's explore. So I can actually move my mouse up until the next tag, right, next nested parent, and put my mouse over that and say, is this the container? Does that look like a container? Looks like a container, right? It contains this button, it contains everything in it. So maybe instead of selecting a specific button, I was interested in checking that the entire row of, or whatever you want to call it, container or panel, or in this case, yeah, and well, I didn't want to use this word, but the entire collection of elements, right, as they relate to each other, is there. And I can actually say, oh, okay, the whole search box is there, right? This area actually has a class, a unique class that I can use to find it. Okay, make sense? So you can actually hover with your mouse and check out what's around that object that you're interested in. Okay? All right, let's go back by yourself. Go ahead and go back to the box that you found before. Do you guys remember how to do that? What do we do?
Click on.
You first select the icon, right? Then it's going to enable the functionality. So first select the icon, then you click back on that element. Okay, so I can look at the actual element and I can say, oh, I see, it has a name, right? It has a name. Or, oh, I see, it has an ID, right? Do you guys remember that I said that if you have something that's an ID, it's a good idea to use that ID because it's unique and it's the least fragile way of locating things on the screen? So I'm like, all right, ID and name, that's nice. I like both of them. I can choose which one I want to use. Or I can say, you know what? Pretend. There's no ID or name. I want to use the XPath, right? I can right-click on that HTML and I can say copy XPath. And it will actually copy the whole XPath to this element for me. So here we go. I go copy XPath. Let me open my notepad. There we go. I'm going to paste it. This is the XPath. All right. Not not a really good XPath. Let's do another one. Let's do for this one, for this guy. So I'm gonna select the search button, and I'm gonna say copy XPath. There we go. A little bit of a better XPath, right?
Which one is that?
I do the search button. So unfortunately, that text box has an ID. So if your Firebug finds that something has an ID, it's also smart enough to recognize that, ooh, IDs are good. So it will do it ID related. But the search button doesn't have an ID, so it said, okay, let me get you the full XPath. Make sense? So that's how you use it. That's how you use Firebug. You use it to find a locator for something. Or you use it to find out the attributes, including the name and the ID of a specific element. All right, so I am having lots of fun with my application under test. And then I noticed something funky. I noticed that when I'm recording, my Selenium IDE keeps putting select frame, select frame, select frame, select frame all through my test script. And I think to myself, what's a frame, right? What's a frame? Well, Firebug lets us actually see what the frame is. So what I want everybody to do is I want you to use this search box over here. There's a little search, and you're going to type in frame. All right? And then you're going to look to the left, and look, it found a frame for you. You guys see that? So as you typed it in, it found the first instance of the word frame. And if you click down on that HTML, notice what's being highlighted.
The whole code?
The whole page is being highlighted? Look very carefully. What's being highlighted?
Just the frame.
It's just the kind of part, right? Actually, if you were to hide this, actually you can see it. It pushed it up. It highlights not everything to the bottom, but kind of this middle part, right? So the bottom part, the copyright, still belongs to the document, the parent document, right? The parent window. And then everything inside, it's blue, that belongs to the document inside the frame. So a frame, I keep losing my markers. A frame is a way to stick one HTML document inside a second HTML document. That's what it is. That's the whole purpose of a frame. Now, you're not actually, if you open the actual .html file that defines this web page, it's not actually going to have HTML opening tag and then inside it another HTML opening tag. That's illegal. That will never parse. It actually has opening HTML tag, closing HTML tag, and inside it, it has frame, and the frame has the reference to a different document. It actually has a reference to a different document that's located over here. Okay? And when the browser sees that, it says, oh, well, let me go first, see what's in that file, render it, and then render everything else in that document around it. Make sense? That's what a frame is. So anytime you start out doing some actions with your Selenium on top, and then you, for whatever reason, need to do some actions inside this gray area now, it says select frame, because it's trying to get into the inner document. And anytime your mouse moves back out of the gray area, because you're, again, clicking one of the tabs, or verifying, the admin, or maybe asserting the title, it says, oh, let me get out of the frame. And then you move back and it says, let me get into the frame, out of the frame. So that's why every time through your code you see select frame, select frame, select frame, select frame. And it's pairs, right? If you get in, you need to get out. Just like you do some stuff here and then you want to log out. That's in and out, right? Now, let's say that you got in and your Selenium IDE forgot to record that you got out, right? And then again recorded that you got in. When you're playing back, what's Selenium going to think? it's going to say, oh, you're inside a frame, and you want to get into a frame inside the frame. So sometimes that happens. And when you play back, you get these errors. Because it's trying to have its own mechanism keep going down the path. And there's no inner frame inside the frame, right? So it fails. So now that you know what frames are, you have to keep this kind of eye out for pairs. Anytime you select a frame, you should either A, see a second select frame right under it that says select the relative up, which basically means now go back up, or you should see select window, which means what?
Go back to the window.
Go back to the window, right? Select window, null means go back top, right? Go back to top. So either way, select relative up, go up, or select window, up. Doesn't matter. The point is there should be pairs. Either you should have an even number of select frames, or you should have a select window for every select frame. Does that make sense to everybody? Ask questions now or forever hold your peace.
So when you deleted the frame in the frame element, the first few examples, you just
I
simplified.
deleted all of them. That's why I said delete all of them. Your question.
So will select window work for frame, or it's only for separate?
Select window works only for windows.
So,
But if you're inside a frame, you can use select window to again select itself, right? To get to the top.
so you use now to just go to the main.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Your question. Back to your question. Why did I tell you you could delete select frames and it still worked? Right?
It was a simple case.
If you could. So apparently, and this is only true for Selenium 1, not Selenium 2, so not for WebDriver. But for Selenium 1, what it does is you pass it a unique XPath or unique ID. It's going to look inside the first document, and if it doesn't find it, it's going to look in the second document. Make sense? So if you never set select frame, it's always going to keep starting from the top and looking for that unique identifier. Make sense? That's why the first two homeworks and everything you did in class for the first 2 weeks, the way I designed it is everything was unique enough so that you could delete all the select frames and you weren't hurt by it. But starting this week, you're going to be in situations where you will be hurt by it. Things are no longer unique. If you don't select the frame correctly, it will actually find something in the parent rather than in the child. Okay? So now that you know, be aware, keep track. It's your responsibility. Yeah? Okay, what's up?
Last question. Can we use pair select frame and then to get out select window now?
Yes, that's the whole point. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have two methods, right? Select in and you can get select window to get out, or select in and select relative up to get out. Okay. Let's see. What's next on our agenda? Oh, yes, and select frame uses ID to select the frame. It uses other things too, but ID in this case. And we just selected our frame. So can you look at the HTML and tell me what the ID is? What's the ID?
Right name.
Right menu is the ID. So now when you go back to your scripts and you take a closer look, let's open one of them. I don't have, here we go. Right, that's what it kept putting in for you. You guys remember? You should be able to understand why it kept saying select frame right menu. Right? You guys understand now?
Yes.
Why it kept saying right menu? Because the ID of our frame, just our frame, is right menu. Right? Okay. You can close down your Firebug by pressing this little shutdown button. It doesn't actually shut down the Firebug for you, it just hides it. I don't know. Okay, so locating elements. I kind of already talked about locators a lot, and I told you that there's multiple ways to select things. But let's kind of do a quick review. Obviously, most of Selenium commands require some kind of selector, right? A locator. And a locator is basically a way, one of many ways, to identify an element on a page, on a web page. Now the way a locator is defined is by, on the left side, specifying what kind of type of locator you're going to use, followed by an equal sign, and on the right side, the actual locator. Now this is the format. It's not really enforced all the time. There are a couple shortcuts. So that's why you might not have seen it often. Sometimes you guys see name equals, ID equals, but you might have not seen expat equals, for example, right? Or DOM equals. You haven't seen that. Because Selenium ID has a couple shortcuts built in. So let's look at the first shortcut. The first shortcut is for DOM, and we're going to be using the HTML on the top as kind of our sampler. I know it's kind of hard to see, but we'll try to work with it the best we can. So you can either say DOM, which is one of the locators, right? DOM equals document blah 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 blah. We're using DOM, or you can just say document. Selenium ID already knows that if anything you put into that box starts with document, it's DOM. That's just the way it is. So it's going to parse whatever it is you put into that locator, which is usually the second column, right? And the first thing it's going to verify is, does it start with document? Right? And if it doesn't, it's going to say, well, does it start with DOM, expat, CSS, name, ID, or whatever, equals. But the first thing it's going to check is, does it start with document? And if it starts with the word document, it's going to say, oh, okay, well, I know what it is. That's okay. Not a problem. So this is optional. DOM equals is optional. You can put it in, or you cannot put it in. It's up to you. All right. Any locator that you see that starts with 2 slashes is an expat. Again, you could technically put expat equals. But if you're going to use a relative expat, and again, if you have 2 slashes, that's actually relative. It's not absolute, it's relative. It's going to say, ooh, slashes. That has to be an expat. Okay, so it's going to assume, without you even saying anything, that it's an expat. Now, you can also use absolute expat. That's actually an expat that starts all the way from the HTML tag. That's also the expat that most of the time when you copy from Firebug, it's going to give you most of the time absolute expat. Sometimes you're going to get relative, but most of the time you're going to get absolute. When you're going to use absolute expat, it starts with 1 slash. So it's not going to assume anything. It's going to say, I'm going to explicitly need you to tell me that this is expat. So if you start with 2 slashes, it assumes. If you start with 1 slash, no assumptions are being made. You have to say expat equals. Okay? Now there are a couple other identifiers. One of them is ID. So you will often see ID equals, right? And then the actual ID. But again, that's optional. You don't have to put ID equals. And you certainly don't have to put identifier equals. You can. Or you can just say login form. What it's going to do is it's going to say no slashes, not a document. Well, must be their ID or name. And it's going to first go through the document and see if it can find anything with that ID. And if it doesn't, it's going to go through and try to find the first thing with that name. Okay? Now, if you have an element that has that name and a different element that has that ID, you probably want to be a little more specific and say ID equals or name equals. But yeah, ID, identifier, or nothing are the same thing. So you can use it either this way or just the way it is right here. Nothing in front of it. All right. Jump back up. We're actually going to do a lot more practice with DOM, so I'm not too worried about this guy. but you can probably guess what it means, right? Can you guys make kind of an educated guess? So document is the top of the document. And then we're saying, inside that document, we want to find a forms tag. And because we're pressing in a 0, that means the first, because it's an array-based kind of schema. Okay? HTML is object-based, so there's no zeros. The object is either there, so it's the first one, or it's not. Document is an array-based schema, so it starts with 0. 0 means 1. Make sense? Yeah.
I have a question, like when I was simple stuff into a script, like a homework and
Uh-huh.
sometimes when I specify the target allocator, only the CSS schema works, other times only like the XPath works. Well, more often than not, actually CSS
Doesn't work?
did not work, and then I specified the XPath.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. They broke it about 8 months ago. And it kind of works on some systems, and some systems it doesn't work. Like for me, it doesn't work. CSS doesn't work. But for other systems, people are like, yeah, I have no trouble. So I don't know. I've kind of deprecated mine, and I've showed in class that I kind of put mine on the bottom. I just don't want to deal with it. But, yeah. And I don't know why they're not fixing it. I guess it's not reproducible enough. Like, you can't say that on all of these systems with all of these things, it just doesn't work. I guess it's just kind of like a 50-50. Anyways, okay, so document, then we're gonna find the first forms, and inside it we wanna find the first username tag. Which part are we referring to? Which line in that code? What do you think?
Third one from the top.
Which line?
3 from the top. Line 3 from the top.
So the first input, right?
Yeah.
The first input. So you guys can kind of guess what it means, right? All right. What about this guy? Same thing. Right? All right. What about, let's look at this XPath. It's relative. It's relative, that means we kind of have to just see if we can find something with this name, and then find something that also has this type. So which line?
Last
The last
one.
one.
Fourth from the bottom.
Last
line.
input.
Yeah, last input. What about this guy?
Same line.
It's the same thing, right? Looks very different.
Right.
So yeah, I'm kind of same thing. 2 different ways to put it. Okay. What about this guy?
First one.
The
Well,
second
line.
line.
This actual form tag, right? The actual form tag. What about the second line?
The first input?
It's the first line of work.
It's the first input.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, locating by CSS. So we understand XPath, right? More or less. We'll play around with it a little later. We understand DOM, more or less. We're going to play around with that later. Let's talk about CSS. All right, so CSS can be used by Selenium as another locating strategy, along with identifier, name, XPath, and DOM.
Can you just, what's the CSS stands for?
Cascading style sheets. Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. I usually ask everybody in the class to tell me. I ask people in class to yell it out. Okay, that sounded weird.
Cascading.
So to locate CSS class, okay, let me step
Can
back.
you say one more thing? Cascading
Style
style.
sheets.
And I'm sorry, would you mind, before we step any further, just repeating all these 4 ways of locating, actually identifying?
There's not 4. There's actually
10 or 12.
Would you mind just saying those again? In this,
So for Selenium IDE, there's 5. And for WebDriver, there's like, I don't even know how many, 15. But the ones we covered already are XPath,
1 second.
DOM, ID, and name, right? And we're talking about CSS right now. And XPath, relative, and absolute, I count as 1, right? Okay, So let's take a closer look at all the inputs over here. Let's take a very close look. You see this attribute? By the way, what are attributes? What are attributes?
That knows, right?
Well, let's use kindergarten language. Anything that doesn't follow the caret immediately after following the caret is an attribute or value of the attribute. Okay? So only this part is the actual tag. Every other thing, especially the ones in blue here, are all attributes. Everything that follows the equal sign afterwards is the value of the attribute. Right? So they're kind of these little, all of those are attributes. And attributes can have any name, right? There's some common ones, and there's some just random weird ones. You can actually put anything you want into your HTML, right? It's not validated. But some of the common ones are what? Well, ID and name we already talked about. ID and name are actually attributes. Another one is class. Now class is actually CSS, right? What is class? Why do we use class? When did class come in?
To group and graduate.
Right. So what happens with CSS is you create an external document external to your HTML document, and you define a whole bunch of properties into groups you call classes, right? Kind of a little overview. So you basically say, everything I call big red is going to be font Times New Roman, is going to have color red, is all going to be size, I don't know, 72 points, and it's all going to be, I don't know, bold, right? So anything later on in your HTML that you say class equals big red is going to have those four things for it. It's going to appear as size 72, bold, red, and whatever it is I said, Times New Roman, right? So this is a common one, class, and it's part of CSS. Now what this is saying, it's saying that we can actually use a class as a way to identify the element. The way to do that is to append the class name, so not the attribute name, the value of the attribute, using a period to the name of the parent tag. Make sense? So let's look at this guy. What's the class? Required pass field, right? That's the class. And we want to identify this element using its class. How would we do that? What's the parent tag? Input, right. The tag that contains this attribute is input. So you would say input dot required pass field, right? Or in this case, just required. Make sense? All right.
So
That makes sense
you
to
don't
everyone.
have to put class equals, you can put just input dot.
You put
required.
dot, exactly. It's so common for CSS that there's a shortcut. You don't have to say class equals. You can just put dot, and it assumes you mean the class value. What's up?
Would you mind taking the fourth line from the top and just explaining briefly again what is value and what is attribute and what is class? Just
This guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So an
So-
example of this line. So this is a value, right? That you just put your finger on.
Okay. So first of all, what's this guy? You tell me. Come on, Dick. Make a guess.
Well, we just said tag.
Make a guess. It's a tag. It's a tag name, right? And this tag contains certain attributes, right? What are the three attributes it contains? Everybody?
Class name and tag.
Class, name, and type, right?
So what is attribute itself? Just in the theoretical sense, what is it attribute?
Well, somebody already said it's property. It's a tag property. It's additional information about the tag.
So it's basically points where it's supposed to be, right?
Well, it doesn't really point, right? An attribute can be anything. I can actually add my own attribute in there called apples
No, I'm talking
and
about
have a
tag.
name for it. You know, have a value for it. Red, green, or
No, I'm talking about tag, right? Tag is actually,
which one?
the parent tag actually, doesn't matter which one.
Oh, the parent tag?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I guess like A is a link. P probably. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, So these are attributes, right? This is the tag. Everything else is a value. And if we want to use the class value to identify something, we're going to put what? Excuse me. We're going to put what?
Dot.
We're going to put the parent, the tag name, right? Dot value, right? But we can't say input dot username, right? Because that's not class. That's name. And we can't say input dot text. That's not class. That's type, right? But if we see something that says class, we can say input dot required.
So what do we use for name and type then? Do we use XPath?
We're going to get there. 1 second.
On this one.
Okay. So everybody understands class, right? Class is a pretty common one, so I drilled that in. Yeah.
Will there be a unique locator if we use CSS? Because all belong to a class. And if I say that, if I give them there for the first input, I say that it belongs to the required class. So by default,
I understand your question.
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to have multiple elements that are likely to belong to the same class.
Yes.
The point is to combine multiple different ways, multiple different things, right? Like the example we did on the previous page that contains this
Yes.
and this
Right.
together to make it unique, right? So we're just taking it one step at a time. Okay. Now this guy is a little weird, right? It allows us to use ID also to append it to the name. But if we have an ID and if it's unique, do we really want to use CSS? No, we can just use the ID, all right? We don't have to go with that whole CSS equals business. We can just use the ID. So I put this out there so you know that it exists. But chances are, if you have a unique ID, you should use the unique ID. You shouldn't use all that other stuff. However, if you have a bug on the page where you have two IDs that are therefore non-unique, and you need to get to the second one, you can use a combination of ID and something else to get there. In any case, let's go over this, even though you will probably never use it. Let's go over it. If you have an element with an ID, and you want to use CSS to identify it, for whatever crazy reason, instead of a dot, what will you use? A pound. So let's use this as an example. To identify this form, what would I say?
Form, form.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I actually have it up. All right, last one. To locate by property other than class or ID. Anything. Type, size, width, href.
Exclude just this.
Well, you can even say class actually specifically, but if you already have a shortcut dot, why bother, right? You can actually use the property name and value as a pair. Okay? In square brackets next to the parent tag name. So before we said parent tag name dot, parent tag name pound. Now we're going to say parent tag name square brackets. And inside the square bracket, instead of putting just the value, we're going to put tag name value. No, I'm sorry, not tag name. Attribute name value. Make sense? So I have a couple examples for you guys over here. One of them being name equals username. Okay, again, name that's unique you can use directly, but I didn't have lots of choice with this thing. This one is a better one. Type, right? You can say type equals password. So this guy, if you want to take a look at this way, this guy, which element is this one referring to? Which line? Over here.
Second.
Password.
Second input.
Oh, right, the second.
The longest line.
Second.
Great, the longest line. This one. Now, is all of this necessary?
That's a question that we have. Why do we need all this?
No, but all of this, could I have removed this whole part and just said input, square brackets, type equals password? And still identified this line?
Yes.
Yeah, I could have done that. It was unique enough. I'm just putting a whole bunch of examples into as little space as I can. Okay? Everybody sort of remembers what they're doing now? So we're going to do an exercise now.
So why do we need all these ways of identifying locators? Why do we need all this squares? Just to understand a little better.
Okay, to make things less fragile.
To do what?
That takes me to my next exercise. Can everybody go to their HRM page? Not the inside, don't log in. Go to the outside. I want you to enter some kind of wrong login and wrong password. For example, ABC123 login. Okay? It should work.
Invalid login.
Okay, I'm actually jumping ahead. Please use your Firebug to locate the invalid login label.